Alrighty, well, I want to thank you for being here this morning, all of you both here with us here, and for those of you at home at Zoom, I'm glad you're able to tune in this morning, and looking forward to sharing with you this morning what I believe the Lord has given me as a message this morning. I had talked to some of you before, and I mentioned I thought for sure it's a little high pitch. I know what it is. Please stand by. We had the monitors turned around for the Chosen movie, and that's why. This feels a little weird. Still. You turn down the monitors. Where was I? Thank you. So thought I knew what I was going to be talking about today, because I said I got two messages in mind, and was really struggling the past couple of days because I wasn't sure if what I thought was the second message was going to be the message for today, or if it still was going to be the day after Christmas like I thought. And the other message that I thought I was going to be sharing today, it was like I could not get any traction on it at all. It was just sitting there. Nothing was coming of it. And every time I come back to it, it just seemed like it was just sitting there and it wouldn't develop. And so I was praying, like, Lord, I have to have something. And I believe this is the direction that He took me, and is taking us as well. So I know nobody likes talking about 2020, but something happened last year that I don't know if many realize. You see, when I first moved to Maine, it was a little bit of shock for me how different it was here than other places I've lived. See, during Christmas time, most places, at least that I've lived, lots of people like to decorate with lights. When we moved here back in 1992, at least to me, it didn't seem as though there were many who put up lights at all. And among other things, it seemed strange at that time. And a lot has changed over the years, certainly. And I'm not saying there weren't any that didn't put up lights. I'm just saying there wasn't as many as I was used to. I noticed something happened last year, and I don't know if you noticed it as well, but despite the all-consuming news of COVID and everyone seemingly being held hostage in their own homes, there was a glimmer of hope. More homes than ever put up Christmas tree lights last year. And I picked up on that because we were driving around, like, they never put up lights before. They never put up lights before. The houses that did put up lights, of course, they had lights up, but they added to what they had as well. And it really struck me. And as best as I could driving, I know my family, they like to look at the lights as we're driving along. Oh, look at that. And I'm like, can't. I have to. Eyes need to be here, can't be there, because that's where we'll end up if I do. But I did notice that there were a lot more lights. And it really spoke to me, and it really spoke to me that it was in a way people were saying, even though it looks like things are getting darker, we're going to raise up a light against the darkness. We're going to make a stand in what way we feel we can. And so they were putting up lights, and it showed. It added a glimmer of hope in the midst of all the darkness that seemed to be clouding and encroaching on our very homes. And it seemed like so much was just pushing and trying to just crush us. But there was a glimmer of hope that I noticed going around. And I've always enjoyed light displays. Back when I lived in Wisconsin, we would drive for miles to see one house in particular. These people went all out. And maybe you know, have come across someone like that they just adding on every year. And you could tell where it was long before you ever got there, because they covered their yard. I mean, I think they even, if I remember right, they even had it so you could drive through, and it was way out in the country, so it wouldn't even be somewhere you would expect maybe to find something like that. But I think I remember they had like a Ferris wheel set up with characters sitting on it, and I mean, they just really every year trying to one up it. I don't know what they do now. It's been a long time since I've been a teenager, and I think I might have taken are we losing my battery? I think I might have taken Tammy there when she came to visit while I was still living in Wisconsin. Or actually, I don't think we were living in Wisconsin at that time. We had already moved. But I went back to visit my mom, and so I think we did stop out there to see that. You know something? It was out in the country, so those lights really stood out against the dark backdrop of the night. And you know, the same thing happened in history. There have been many dark times in history, but there was one time that was unique. Why? Well, because God said that it was at this particular time. The Bible might read, it was at the appointed time. He had assigned a particular time for an event to take place. And at this particular time, he was going to send his only son to be born as the light against the dark backdrop of the world in need of a Savior. You see, the Bible records that God is resplendent with light. He wraps himself in light with a garment. But sadly, because of sin, Adam and Eve and all their descendants after them were banished from the presence of God in the Garden of Eden. And you know, that's the true tragedy of sin. Separation from the light. They were cast into a world of spiritual darkness, and light has no fellowship with darkness. There's nothing in common between the two. So how could what started in the Garden of Eden be rectified? Ultimately, only God could deal with the problem of sin, and the key is found in the verse that I have been referring to regularly lately. And I would guess that you all know this one by heart. Because it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him." And you probably know that as John 3:16 and 17 in addition. Out of love for mankind, God sent his Son to earth, knowing that what lay ahead of him. Jesus' birth was the biggest step in God's plan of redemption. The reason Christmas exists at all is because 2,000 years ago, a child was born. The Son of God, the Messiah, had been prophesied for generations, had finally come. Now, only God could reconcile mankind back to himself. Only God could bring humanity back out of darkness into his wonderful light. So God went to great lengths to reconnect with mankind. To do so, he had to break down the barrier of sin that separated us from him. He did this through what is called the incarnation. He accomplished this by entering the world as a man. But he didn't show up as a man, but instead he showed up as a baby. This event was like none other. Truly, the incarnation, God taking on flesh, is a great paradox. Consider the words of Augustine. He was created of a mother whom he created, was carried by hands which he formed. He sucked at breasts which he had filled, cried in the manger in wordless infancy. He, the Word, without whom all human eloquence is mute. You think about that. The one who spoke light into existence lie in a manger in wordless infancy. Couldn't speak. He spoke light. Genesis 1:3 tells us, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Which brings me to John chapter 1. Verse 1 through verse 5. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made. And without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The very one who spoke light into being became light to the world, steeped in darkness. Regarding the birth of Jesus, the Gospel of John records, light has come into the world. Jesus himself said, I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. So surely it's appropriate that our Christmas celebrations be filled with light as we celebrate Jesus, the light of the world. It's very easy to get caught up in all the trappings that come with Christmas. It's very easy to be distracted by all the trappings that come with Christmas. I remember a time in my life, which I'm not proud of, where I wasn't anti-Christmas, but I thought I was enlightened. I thought I knew, well, I was a teenager, so I thought I knew it. And I ruined Christmas for my family pretty much that year. I regret it, but it was where I was and what I did, and it's unfortunate, but true. I thought all the different things, all the extra things, all the decorations and all that didn't have anything to do with Christmas. Thought it was all just a bunch of extra fluff. It was all capitalism and all these different things. And granted, there are a lot of negative things that have been worked their way into the celebration of Christmas, no doubt. But what I didn't know and I didn't understand is actually how much these different things that make up the trappings of our Christmas celebration actually have a point. Which a lot of it has been lost in history. I was talking to the kids last week about the Christmas tree. Where did it come from? Well, why? And there's some who want to say, well, it was all part of a pagan thing, and we've taken it from pagan worship and this stuff. But they need to do a little more research because it all started in Germany. And there's some different stories behind it. One in particular really captured my attention because during the medieval times, they would do a play called the Paradise Play, and which talked about some of the very things I'm saying this morning, well, Adam and Eve in the garden. And of course, at that time of the year, just like our time of the year, not many green plants around, are there? And you want something that represents life, that represents the green and glory of the Garden of Eden. And really the only thing that really works for us, and this one's fake, but are the evergreen trees. And so they would take an evergreen tree, I don't know which particular variety, I don't really think it matters, and they would use that in the production of this play, and they would hang an apple on it, and it would represent sin and all the story of the Garden of Eden, and at the end, they also talked about how Jesus came and to give us life and to set us free and all of that. But then there came a dark time in Germany, and they weren't allowed to put on that play any longer. And so what they would do is they would put a tree in their home to remind them of the play that had been produced and what that meant. And you notice the red ornaments on there. I'm sure at some point, apples got to be a problem hanging on a tree. But, we could make something artificial that would probably work and represent it as well. And so a red ornament like that could be very representative of an apple. And granted, I don't believe that apples were what Adam and Eve ate from anyways, but it's a symbol. It's something to remind us. In the same way we take communion, it's a symbol. It's something to remind us, and over and over again. And you guys know, I've been saying this repeatedly lately, haven't I? Remember, remember, remember. We need to remember. Why? Because I believe we are going to probably be coming into another dark time. And we're going to need to hold on to things like that.
Yes.
We're going to need to hold on to these symbols to remember. I don't know what kind of things are coming in the near future. I don't know what kind of restrictions we'll be under. I don't know what kind of, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't have a book that gives me all the information. I know, generally speaking, some things that are coming down the pipe, but I don't have a timeline, I don't really know exactly everything that's going to happen. But I do have a sense that something's going to happen. And if you took a time to look in history, you'll see it wasn't just one dark time in history. It's happened over and over and over again. And there's been persecution of the church. There's been persecution that has happened over and over again from different people, but all with the same purpose, to try and put out the light. It's nearly impossible to fully understand the importance of Christmas until you recognize what Jesus came to accomplish. The purpose of Jesus' birth was to live a blameless life and one day lay it down, taking upon himself the burden of sin, and then 3 days later, take it up again in his resurrection. His birth prepared the way for his death. And his death had to happen so that he could rise from the dead. And through all of this, it was made possible for us to be reunited with him. See, that's been God's end game. To reconnect, to mend that brokenness, that separation that we have from him, to bring us back. That's why we celebrate Christmas, is because it's not only a time for families to reunite. There are a lot of families that get together, and I know a lot of families are estranged. I understand. And I have it in my family. You probably have it in some of your family. There's people who don't talk to each other. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. But the bigger issue is that we not be separated from God. Because that's what Christmas, the celebration of Christmas, is meant to remind us of. He came to be one of us so that we could be with him. He came to be with us so we could be with him. Unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given. His name shall be called Emmanuel, God with us. Think about that. God with us? The one who spoke light? I flip a switch. Or I like solar lights. Because as soon as darkness comes, they come on. They don't wait. They respond to the darkness immediately. As long as they've been in touch with the sun. And that's what we're called to do as well. If we've been in touch with the sun, when the darkness does come, and it comes in all different forms, in all different ways, let your light shine. He is a living light that shines over us and ahead of us. As the psalmist sings, "The Lord is my light and my salvation." Jesus is God's marvelous light for us who believe. He covers our darkness with his gracious forgiveness. He opens up the future for us and gives us a hope in him. He opens the present for us as well and empowers us to serve and to follow him in our daily lives. And he is always with us to guide and to lead us forward. He has called us out of darkness into his marvelous light, as it says in 1 Peter 2:9. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Our mission, as Peter describes it, is to bear witness to God, to testify to him in daily life. We are to proclaim God's mighty deeds. Some of us probably think that this is principally the work for pastors, for missionaries, and other church leaders. But Peter sees this as the work and ministry of all of us who believe. We are all called to show forth God's grace and mercy. It says that in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness. It's personal. If he's called you out of darkness, wouldn't you want to tell somebody? Mm-hmm. I talked to Chris this morning. He was telling me about my wife's cookies. It was a special event in his life. Those of you who've eaten your cookies know what I'm talking about. It's not just, you know. If God has done something in you, isn't it something you want to share? It's not a secret to be kept. It's a light to be shined. It's something to be shared. That's why driving around and seeing the lights that are up for Christmas, it blesses me. I can't park the car necessarily to look at them and enjoy them the way I'd like to, but knowing that they're there and just even getting to see a glimpse of them brings me joy. Not just because it's there, because I know what it represents. I know the meaning behind it, personally. Back in the Old Testament, God made a promise to Abraham. It's found in Genesis 22:16. In this promise, God compared his descendants that Abraham would have to the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky. Genesis 22:16 says, "By myself I have sworn." That's a pretty good promise right there. Swore by himself. That's a ironclad guarantee. God swears by himself. There's no room for disappointment. Because he does not disappoint. Because he is love. And 1 Corinthians 13 tells us love does not disappoint. By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your only son, talking about when Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac, I will surely bless you, and I will multiply your descendants like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will possess the gates of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations of the earth will be blessed because you have obeyed my voice. It's interesting that this is said after Abraham is willing to give his only son. Now I know there was Ishmael, but he was the son of promise. Isaac was the son whom God's promise was going to come to pass. That's how everything was going to take place that God had promised. Because it was God who made it possible for Abraham and Sarah to conceive at such a late age. But think about that. Abraham's descendants like stars in the sky. Have you been out on a starry night?
Yeah.
And tried to see as many as you possibly can?
Mm-hmm.
The outside church light becomes a problem for that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we like to come down and just turn it off, so we can stand out on the deck and just either watch a meteor shower or one night we did go up on the top of the hill here because the Aurora Borealis was such, it was fantastic. And it was like the sky was just aglow all above us. It was hopefully not a once in a lifetime experience. Hopefully we get to see something like that again. But to look up in the night we did worship out here in the parking lot. And you can look up and you can see the Milky Way and all the stars. It's just astounding. Abraham's descendants like the stars in the sky. Yes. Yes. Let's be that. Let's be stars. Let us be like the star that pointed the way to the one who was born to save us. Let us shine in the darkest night so others can see and find their way to him. Let us proclaim the heart of the Christmas story so others can hear and believe. Let's be stars. Let's be lights in the midst of the darkness. You know, many of us have traditions that we follow each year at Christmas, and this by itself it's not a bad thing. It's just different things we do, different traditions we have. We can still hang lights and put up Christmas trees and watch Christmas movies and listen to Christmas songs and bake cookies, exchange gifts. The problem happens, though, when all of those things, we lose sight of why we're celebrating. And it's easy to do sometimes, isn't it? Even getting ready for today and, preparing a meal. And some of you really outdid yourselves. Put a lot of work into it. My wife was down here last night cleaning. And she thought it was only 8:30, but the clock downstairs wasn't working.
Oh. Whew.
So she got up to the house about 11. Christmas is important because of Jesus and only Jesus. And unless we can see Christ in our Christmas, it isn't really Christmas at all. So hang lights, give gifts, make cookies. They're all wonderful things, but remember that we give because Christ first gave. We hang lights because he was a light in dark places. We put up a tree in memory of what he came to accomplish. And sing songs of worship unto his glorious name. So let us, as it says in Matthew, so shine before men, that they may see our good works and glorify our Father, which is in heaven. At this time, I'd like to share How Low Was Our Redeemer Brought is a song. So even though you can't hear it on Zoom, go to YouTube. It's by Sovereign Grace Music. How Low Was Our Redeemer Brought. I came across this late last night. Didn't know this song existed, but it is so fitting. And I couldn't resist having it be part of this morning. And I want to share it with you right now. Gonna share it. Promise.
How low was our Redeemer brought, the King who held
So I encourage you this Christmas and beyond, take time to consider why. If you ask no other question, ask that one. Why? And then maybe you'll say something like the song that I like during this time of year, do you hear what I hear? Do you see what I see? Because he's speaking, he's sharing, he wants to meet us where we're at. He wants to reconnect with us. And he is, as I say, pulled out all the stops to do that. He gave up everything so we could be his. And he could be our everything. Heavenly Father, I thank you this morning. Lord, if we are willing, I pray that these things that keep us from you finally come down. And we reconnect with the light of our lives. You made a way that no one else could make. Nobody could do it like you did it. And that's why we celebrate. That's why we reflect on. That's why we observe and remember and reflect. Because you did something truly amazing when you came for us. And so, Lord, if we say nothing else, we say thank you. Whether we receive or reject the gift that you've given to us, Lord, we say thank you. Because you didn't have to, but you chose to. You so loved us. So, little word, but carries so much weight. So loved. Thank you. And Lord, I pray that during this Christmas season, Lord, and beyond, Lord, that we take time, make time to respond and to appreciate this gift that you've given to us. And Lord, I know wherever we are at, whatever we're doing, if we are open, you will meet us right there. And I thank you. In your precious name. May we go in peace and be at peace with you. In your precious name, amen.
Amen.